In the last address, Blessed Geza gave what could be argued to be his most passionate and relatable address so far. This debacle has been going on for quite a bit of time, 2 to 3 months going on, but since the beginning, Blessed Geza was presenting himself as a main actor, as the invincible guy who is in control of the situation, as the guy who has got people in high offices who are opposed to the idea of ED 2030 behind him. He presented as someone who is fully in control of the different faculties of Zimbabwean politics that is against the 2030 mantra. He presented himself as someone who has got the masses behind him, the army behind him, members of the opposition behind him, and everyone and anyone else who could do something to make sure that the 2030 agenda doesn't go on. However, in the previous broadcast that he just made, he came as a different man. Of course, at the beginning of the broadcast, he spoke in his usual self, speaking in terms of, all sorts of issues that he was raising and talking to different constituencies. But halfway or so through that address, you actually see a man who is dejected and out of ideas of what he can do next. What am I talking about? You see that he starts by talking about the fact that President Mugabe, before he was removed from office, was actually considered the option of VP Chiwenga becoming the president. And he actually says, Mugabe told him to say, guys, I would rather let you be the president than this guy that you want to put in the office. It's the first time that most of us have had that revelation. Because we know and we have had what has been publicly said by those who were in those circles is to say, no, Sekramai is the one that President Mugabe wanted to take over. Of course, we have heard the stories that Grace Mugabe wanted to take over and so on and so forth. But in terms of what we have heard, that's what Mugabe wanted. Those are the stories that we have heard. And we've heard that Mugabe said, let us wait until we go to the conference at the end of the year. But for the first time we hear, at least for most of us, that the president said, okay, VP Chiwenga rather lead the country, not President ED. And most of us don't necessarily take seriously that part of his address because it's like, okay, he's just saying what he usually says and, the different theories that he presents. But along the way, Blessed Geza now says to VP Chiwenga and the army generals, guys, we are struggling here. The children of Zimbabwe have suffered. We are looking at the constitution being at a risk of being torn apart. And you, VP General Chiwenga, in 2017, you sat down and stood up holding the constitution. And you said the job of the army and what the generals were doing was to defend and protect the constitution of the country. Now we are sitting with a situation whereby that constitution is at risk. The pinnacles of that constitution are to be essentially broken down. So the only people that we can ask and expect that they should be able to help us solve this problem is you, the members of the army. And the children of Zimbabwe are begging you to do something about this. So this is the first time this is a totally different approach. His approach is almost like he's washing his hands and saying, there's nothing else I can do. I'm here to speak on behalf of the citizens. And we are asking you guys, can you do something about this? He is no longer saying, I'm the main actor. He is not saying, I am representing the army. In this case, he is not presenting himself as a general or a commander. He's just saying, I'm just a foot soldier. I'm just a citizen who is here asking you guys to please do something about this. Can you please help us solve the problem that we have? So this is a totally different change of approach. He then goes towards the end of the broadcast, really backing down and saying, the Povo supported you guys in 2017. Povo came to the streets to support you. And that Povo is coming back to you and say, please help us. So he is almost signing out of leading this charge. And just to reflect back, you'd remember that, there was the 31 March demonstrations, 21 April, and so on, stairways, indefinite stairways. They tried the impeachment process, tried processes within Zanu PF. And what is actually clear right now is all the ideas I had, thinking that I would have support from you guys, I've not gotten that support. So I'm coming out in the open so that everyone knows that I've just done what I can. The only people who can actually make the difference and bring the change that we seek is actually the guys that are sitting at KG6 or that were formerly at KG6 that are now all over the country in different capacities. So it seems that the movement at the moment has kind of quieted down, which was, something that was out in the open and everyone knew anyway. And it seemed like, that's where things were. But this is the first time that actually Blessed Geza comes out in the open and says, yeah, you know what? I don't have this under control anymore. I do not have any influence anymore that I can make. The difference that I can make is only to speak to these guys who actually have got the ability and the capacity to change the situation to do that. But from my end, this is the far that I could do. This reminds and brings us to one of the videos that I've done previously, where we spoke about whose side are the war veterans. And part of that conclusion of that discussion was to say, the onus is actually on society on where we place war veterans within society. Because if you look at this way that Blessed Geza was speaking, it is easily possible that within a week or two or a month, you would see him going back begging in Zanu PF to say, can you please reinstate my position? Because we are banned outside of Zanu PF. Because there is no embrace that he's receiving outside of the Zanu PF space. So we are almost in a situation whereby we are essentially in a one-party state. The opposition is as good as non-existent. And those who say or that they are leading or have intentions to lead outside of the ruling party in the different societies, the onus is on them to embrace those that have come out of that system. If there is any desire to actually change the situation. Because when one looks at how things have transpired within that space of opposition, the question actually is there any willingness for a change? But it is important as well to just dwell on the fact that actually the purpose of an opposition party or organization within a country is not necessarily for regime change, but it helps to keep the balance. It helps to put those who are in power to actually think about decisions that they are making. That they don't necessarily just make decisions that they know there's no consequence whatsoever because no one is checking and no one is looking. I guess an example is that during the days of Tendai Biti being in parliament, at least you know the guys within, finance and within government, they knew at least someone is going to challenge what we're going to say. So to some extent, they sanitize their presentation to an extent. But with the situation that we have at the moment, that is not there, which has got its own risks to the country. But coming back to Blessed Geza, it would be interesting to see how his tone dwindles out of this discussion. But essentially what he has done, he has brought to the fore the army generals and those within the army to say, you are the ones that can change the situation. I can only do so much, but I'm here to speak on behalf of the masses and standing together with the masses and say, guys, Tatambura, please help us.